Good evening, one and all. We call the meeting to order. Recognize alternates. I see Eric.
I'm filling in for John Thomas this evening.
Okay. Brian Wason is with us from North Liberty.
For Chris Hoffman?
Yep.
Thank you both.
Any other alternates? Anyone in an altered state?
Don't ask.
Okay, we got one taker down there.
Later.
Next, we have consider approval of meeting minutes. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? If not, a motion to approve, please.
So moved. Taylor, Iowa City.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Set next board meeting date, time and location. January 26th is what you have down.
Yeah, we always meet the last Wednesday of January, just so we have time to work with East Central Iowa Council of Governments to get our, basically to get our data for the budgets together. So this year would be no different. I usually have a location, but since this is our first meeting back in person, I wasn't sure how it would go and what meeting space would work best. So I put to be determined, but as I usually do, I'll send out the save the date for that meeting about a month, maybe 5-6 weeks in advance. So you'll have plenty of advance notice, and I'll make sure to highlight it and bold it and do all those things. But from here on out, unless things change, we should be meeting in person is the word I've got from the attorney's office. So makes it a little bit harder for this group since we're coming from all over the place, but it is what it is, and we'll spread out and do the best we can to stay safe.
So meeting place to be determined yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Next item, public discussion of any item not on the agenda. Do we have persons present like to speak to the group?
If not, I just had a few things. I wanted to take just a minute to recognize a few outgoing board members, which we do this time every year. We've also got some congratulations to be had for folks in the room. The first, I will say, is I've got a certificate of appreciation for Mazahir, who is not yet here tonight. Mazahir has been on the board since 2018, and I will make sure that Mazahir gets this when I see her next. The next would be Susan Mims. Susan Mims is also leaving the Iowa City City Council. Susan has been on the board, this board, since 2010, and I think maybe missed 2 or 3 meetings in that 10-year span. So,
She's been a good one.
yes. Congratulations to Susan as well. She was also the chair of the board in 2016 and 2017. I'll make sure Susan gets that as well. And then last but not least is our own chair, Terry Donahue. Terry, if I looked at this, if I looked back correctly, has been on the board since 2011, I think, this board. Obviously chaired this year as well as last year. And I believe Terry came on after the 2010 census when North Liberty got their second seat on this board. So congratulations, thanks to all 3 of those folks. And I can honestly say that Johnson County's in a better spot because of them. So.
Well, thank you. Okay, go to the administration category. Kent, you have the first one.
Yes.
Central Iowa Council of Governments.
Yes, thank you. And thanks everyone for coming to our first meeting back in person. Kent Ralston, Executive Director of the MPO. As you may recall, the MPOJC bylaws stipulating how appointments to the East Central Iowa Board of Directors were revised and approved last year after some lengthy discussions. Per those revised bylaws, each January, the Johnson County Board of Supervisors will now appoint 1 elected official representative and then 1 citizen representative to the ECOG board. And then this board will also appoint 2 elected official representatives to the ECOG board annually. So as noted in your packet, that first elected official seat and citizen representative are designated by the Board of Supervisors. And that will happen indefinitely until we revise the bylaws again someday, perhaps. This year, Rod Sullivan is on the board, and I'll see if Rod is going to continue in that position or if it's Roy Sand or someone else. And Donna Brooks was the citizen representative, and I'll also contact them and see who they'd like to represent them on the ECOG board. Second is 1 elected official seat will be filled by the 4 largest municipalities in Johnson County, which will alternate annually. The 2022 representative this year is to be designated by the City of Iowa City, And under the old set of bylaws, currently Lauren Whitehead with the Mayor Pro Tem from the City of Solon is on the ECOG board. So Mayor Pro Tem will be sliding off, and then someone will be represented from the City of Iowa City. And then last, one elected official seat will be filled by the remaining municipalities, which will rotate annually. The 2022 representative is to be designated by the City of Lone Tree, and currently Louise Fromm, Mayor of University Heights, is sitting on that board and will rotate off. I'll contact Johnson County, Iowa City, and Lone Tree and request that they designate someone for the board, and then that will be brought to you back in January, basically just for your approval. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Appoint nominating committee for calendar year 2022. It's yours again.
Yeah, thanks. So as we do every year, at your next meeting, you will elect a chairperson and vice chairperson for the calendar 2022 Urbanized Area Policy Board. The chairperson is obviously responsible for presiding over meetings of the board, and the chairperson and/or director are also responsible for signing contracts and documents throughout the year. As director, it's been my practice to discuss agenda items and major work program activities, which the chair and I do prior to most meetings. And then, of course, the vice chairperson presides over the meetings when the chair is not available. What I'd like from the board today is that you please consider appointing a 3-person nominating committee to recommend a chair and vice chair for next year's board. And currently, the chair obviously is Terry Donahue. The mayor will be rotating off this year as he will no longer be in office. And the vice chair, John Thomas, has also served 2 years as vice chair. So both of those positions have a 2-year maximum term limit, but it's important to know that the vice chair can become chair and then serve 2 years. So just a little bit confusing. I'm happy to answer any questions you have and look for that 3-person nominating committee. Typically, the committee meets either by phone, maybe through emails, or sits down and has coffee and just kind of talks it through and then reports back to me. So looking for 3 volunteers, ideally from different communities. It doesn't have to be that way, but that would work out best.
I'll volunteer, Ken.
Thank you, Louise.
Good thing, because you were going to get it regardless.
Thanks, Louise. Oh, thank you, Lori.
Number 3,
Thank you, Janice.
thank you.
So I will reach out to you 3 here within the next week or so and just kind of provide you with some background information. Also included in the packet was the long list all the way back to 1981 of chairpersons of the MPO. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Item 3C, preliminary discussion of the fiscal 23 MPO budget.
Yeah, thanks. Prior to the preparation of the MPO budget for consideration at your next meeting, it's been my practice to discuss proposed changes to the MPO with you in advance with regards to either scopes of services or operations that we have. The focus and purpose of the MPO remains to fulfill requirements necessary for local communities to receive state and federal funding, to produce professional studies to support transportation-related decisions, which can also include capital improvement program items, to coordinate transit and transit reporting consistent with federal guidelines for Iowa City Transit, Coralville Transit, as well as the University of Iowa's CAN bus system, to assist local entities with review of development proposals, which we've been doing more and more of, and then to serve as a forum for other issues that may pop up throughout the year that have a sort of a county-wide interest. Capital expenses for FY23 are expected to be very similar to recent years, which has also been the case, at least for the last 3 or 4 years. I'm not proposing any new changes to the level of MPO staffing for FY23, nor any additional scope of services. It looks like about a 3.9% increase in the total MPO budget, primarily due to annual increases in salaries and health benefits. In fact, of the estimated roughly about $30,000 increase that I see, about 75% of that's just for wages and healthcare costs. Nothing new there. I anticipate using about $230,000 of the Iowa DOT's PL funds, or planning funds as we call them, which has been done in years past. And I also anticipate utilizing about $50,000 worth of our own internal MPO reserves. Both of those sort of have a rule of thumb about how much we like to keep in the bank, so to speak. And using the $230,000 and the $50,000 kind of puts us about where we need to be. I will say that with the recent federal legislation that was passed, there has been talk of MPOs receiving more PL funds. I don't know how serious that is, and I'll keep you all posted. If we do receive more PL funds for FY23, it's possible that we may either need to reduce assessments to the communities, which of course would be a good thing, or possibly use those PL funds in FY24, and then we'll have to juggle our assessments. But either way, if the MPO gets more funding, it's good for all of our respective organizations. So I'll keep you posted on that. And the formal budget will, of course, then come back to you at your January meeting for approval. But again, pretty much status quo as it has been in years past. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you all might have for me this afternoon.
Any questions? Okay, we'll move ahead. Brad, you're next up. Title VI Compliance Plan.
Yes, thank you. Brad Newman, Associate Transportation Planner. Because the MPO receives federal funding, can everybody hear me okay with the mask? I don't want to take it off with Louise sitting this close. So, we're required to have an approved Title VI compliance program. This document is prepared for the Federal Transit Administration and is required every 3 years. We don't confuse this with the Federal Highway Administration version of the Title VI. That was separate, and you approved that years ago. And then we also we actually prepare the Title VI programs for the 3 transit agencies on their behalf. So a lot of Title VI documents out there. The Title VI program assures non-discrimination as outlined in the Civil Rights Act and prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, or national origin. The attached document provides guidelines for the MPO to follow in order to comply with all Title VI requirements. Also included in the document is a limited English proficiency assessment, which helps in our language assistance program. We also include the MPO's public participation plan, which was approved by the board back in 2017, and I believe it's due for updating probably in the spring. The policy statement and assurances have been signed by the MPO director, Kent Ralston, and the Iowa City Civil Rights Coordinator. She is part of the complaint process and we operate through the city of Iowa City, so she has reviewed and signed the document as well. The Title VI plan can be found on our MPO website, as well as the complaint forms. I do want to point out one thing on page 42, which is attachment E. There are 3 maps that we have not updated yet, but we will get those updated before we submit to the DOT. The Technical Advisory Committee recommended approval of the Title VI at their meeting last week, and staff is requesting approval of the Title VI compliance program and the resolution, which we'll have Terry sign. Are there any questions on the plan or the process? Otherwise, we're looking for approval.
Any questions? If not, asking for someone to establish the resolution in regards to the Title VI compliance program, please.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Final discussion or questions?
Just a clarification for me. I noticed in the report there hasn't been any complaints in the past 3 years, which is good. And if there were, are you guys the governing authority for those matters, or does Coralville kick in, take care of it? Is it a dual path? Just kind of curious how those are resolved.
Yeah, it is a good thing that we've not had any complaints. My take on it would be that we would handle those in coordination with whoever's system it may have occurred on, or if it's just
It
or if
would
it's just
be
against
with
the MPO itself.
So it'd be through Iowa City.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah,
if we
so-
had an issue
and-
on
Yeah,
Canvas,
through
we
this-
would
yeah.
actually, okay. I
Yes,
did not
but
know
then
that.
if it was, if the complaint was directed towards me, for instance, then we would work with Iowa City and Stephanie
Sure.
Bowers and the
And if
the
it's
city's
with CANBUS, that would
visions.
be through their Title VI program,
Oh, okay.
and
Okay.
which would go through the university.
Right.
So,
But
yeah,
we would
this
use
is-
Iowa City for our human
Yeah.
rights
The
coordinator.
wording felt like it lifted into, but
Yeah.
that makes sense. Thank
Yep.
you.
Any other questions? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, say no. Resolution passes. Brad, you have the next one.
I do. This is in regard to staff authorization for the Federal Transit Administration. In May of 2018, the MPO Board approved agreements with Iowa City Transit, Coralville Transit, and University of Iowa CAMBUS, identifying specific mutual responsibilities that are to be performed by the MPO and the transit agencies. This is something that is required since we receive federal money. The transit agencies are the recipient of those funds, so we have to have agreements outlining responsibilities. As part of that agreement process, we're required to designate a specific MPO staff person to implement these agreed-upon activities. I am currently listed as the person to carry those items out and work with transit to get theirs done as well. But now the MPO is, we're like to name Frank Wayseth, who's been on staff here for, what, 3 years? As the new authorized designee, staff is requesting approval of the change and approval of the authorizing designation letter, which we'll have Terry sign. And there is no change to the transit agreements. But I think we'll probably end up reviewing those here in the near future after we have some triennial reviews coming up in the spring. Probably need to update that. Technical Advisory Committee recommended approval. Is there any questions on that document? This document will be signed by the chair, and then we'll send that down to Federal Transit in Kansas City and start that process of moving everything over to Frank's name. That's just great.
Any questions for Brad on this?
Yeah, the long and the short is we just need to have someone designated to basically sign those documents and send to the FTA, and we just like to change that to Frank.
Therefore, we're asking for a motion from the group to authorize the designation.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Janice. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Brad.
Thank you.
Kent, Transportation Planning, A.
Yes, thank you. So as many of you may recall, the Federal Highway Administration now requires the MPOs set targets for 5 safety performance measures as part of the Highway Safety Improvement Program and report them to the DOT by February of each year. We've done this, I think, now for 4 years, but for each measure, we either need to choose one of 2 options. We either need to support the state's 21 targets, which are in your packet for review, by agreeing to plan and program projects so they contribute to those goals, or we need to set our own goals. In either event, we're required to state how our annual projects programmed in our TIP help support those goals, and we would also have to do the same thing in our long-range plan, which we have an agenda item later to discuss tonight, and is also due in May. So we're working on both of those things. Similar to past years, I would recommend that we again adopt the state's targets. I don't see a clear benefit to adopting our own right now. And if at any given time we want to do that, we can start that process prior to February of each year. So that is my recommendation. I have attached supporting information from the DOT for your reference. And then last week at their November 9th meeting, the Transportation Technical Advisory Committee unanimously approved adopting the state's targets as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, in relation to the state targets, the group, namely your people, keep track of against it what's going on, so you can
Correct.
do a comparison analysis.
Correct. So when we, for instance, when we program everyone's project, so if you receive funding through the MPO when we program those projects, we have to basically state how that project helps meet these goals of keeping number of fatalities low or the number of serious injuries down. The issue, and this is part of the reason why I don't see a clear benefit to actually adopting our own targets, is that we even have scoring criteria when we allocate funds that give more points for projects that have safety improvements within them or that sort of thing. So I don't see a clear benefit to doing this right now, but like I say, if any given time we want to, we certainly can. And if you think about some of these too, like for instance, number of fatalities, if the state's target is 337.8, you know, here in Iowa City, in Coralville, our urban area, fortunately, we really, we may have a fatality or 2 each year on average, most of which are out on the interstate. So when you look at setting a goal, the goal would have to be 0. And then at some point, if there's any teeth put to this by the Federal Highway Administration, then it worries me a little bit that if we have a fatality, what's that do to our funding? And we haven't got to that point yet, but I think that's probably coming at some point, because I don't see the reason to have safety criteria if you're not actually going to put some teeth behind them. So anyway, that's been my rationale in the past, but like I said, I just don't see a clear benefit to actually creating our own at this point.
Any comments?
That was a long-winded answer, but it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense, I think, at this point.
We would ask the group to consider approval of the safety targets and performance measures, please.
I'll move to adopt the state's targets.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thanks. Lori, right? It's hard to tell with a mask. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, motion carries. Emily?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Emily Bothell. I'm the Senior Associate Transportation Planner. So we have been very busy recently updating our travel demand model. That's updated every time we update our long-range transportation plan and drafting plan chapters since your July meeting. Attached, you will find a couple draft chapters for your review. They are the regional context chapter and the road and bridge chapter. You may notice that they appear a little grainy in the document you received. This is just the way that it was scanned in and shared with you all. If you would like a cleaner version right now, you can always go to the MPO's website under the Long Range Transportation Plan page, and we have PDFs of all the draft chapters that are currently available. This will also be completely corrected once we get that final draft document to you all early next year. You'll notice some content in the Road and Bridge chapter is also marked as draft or not yet available, and this is just because we're drafting content as material and data becomes available to us. This is also why you may not receive all of the chapters sequentially, and you'll receive what's noted in the memo early next year. The board will also have an opportunity to review the full document in its entirety, probably in March. And at that time, we will also give a brief presentation pointing out some content that is of importance for the metro region. As a reminder, this is an update to the last plan, and so the layout does remain the same. Each modal chapter has general statistics of that mode, it has a vision. We have challenges and opportunities and successes, and you'll also find the fiscally constrained road and bridge projects within that road and bridge chapter. We enhanced tables, charts, and maps throughout the planning document, and we also added a COVID section where we can. We discuss the impacts of the pandemic. So for the road and bridge chapter, we note the decrease in vehicle miles traveled and the impact on road use tax funds that are associated with that. We wanted to get these chapters in your hands early so you have an opportunity to get a first look at them. You, again, will have another look at them early next year. We don't need approval of these chapters tonight, but if you have any feedback or questions for us, we would be happy to take that back and work on it before we get the final draft document to you all.
Any interim questions? If not, thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Brad, we have you up next.
Yeah, and I'll quickly just tee this up while Brad's getting to the podium. Before Brad starts on the discussion of Crandwick Passenger Rail and potential next steps, I was just going to mention that I think Brad will give a quick and brief update about where we've been. As I think most of you will remember, we've done 2 or 3 different studies now on passenger transportation on the Crandwick Rail. And then we were fortunate enough to have Amanda Martin and Tammy Nicholson from the DOT join us. Amanda is the rail director for the DOT, and Tammy is the, remind me, the modal division.
Modal Transportation Bureau.
Thank you. And we appreciate both of them coming very much. So I think then we'll look to those two just to give us a quick update on state of rail in Iowa and anything else that they find useful. And then I think then we'll shift to the board and have a quick discussion.
Yeah, like Kent said, we've got some folks here from the DOT that'll give a quick update after I give my update, I guess. I just wanted to remind you of the 3 studies that we've done since 2015 on passenger rail. Initially, we looked at phase one, we looked at Iowa City to Cedar Rapids as part of that study. And at the time, it was determined that it was feasible to implement between Iowa City and North Liberty, and it was based on the cost and ridership projections at the time. And the recommendation then was for Cedar Rapids would be done in a future phase. Phase two, of course, then narrowed that focus down to Iowa City to North Liberty, and that was between Gilbert Street here in Iowa City, just right out here actually, and Forever Green Road in North Liberty. Phase three extended the route to Penn Street in North Liberty and focused more on specific ridership and cost estimates, and also focused on getting us ready for future grant applications through the federal government. The studies, these were all completed in 2020. Phase three was also presented to a group of stakeholders within the urbanized area. Some of you may have been part of that. And I just wanted to remind you real quick some of the highlights that came out of those studies. Again, the focus area was on a 9.1 mile rail segment between Gilbert Street in Iowa City and Penn Street in North Liberty. It included service every 30 minutes between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m., 7 days a week. Included the purchase of 6 new self-propelled push-pull configuration rail cars, seating 75 to 85 people per car, and included ADA accommodations and bicycle storage. The ridership forecast was about 1.4 million passengers per year, and just under 1.8 million passengers per year by 2027. This is comparable to the Eastern Iowa Airport at 1.3 million passengers. That was in 2019. And Iowa City Transit served 1.4 million passengers in 2019. Those were all, we used 2019 because that was pre-COVID. Last year we had good numbers. It also included a $55 million upfront capital expenditure, $4.8 million in annual operating and maintenance costs, and about $2.1 million in fare revenue, and this was about $1.50 per fare. It was based on that ridership number. And that left about $2.7 million in additional funding annually. Since that time, Crandix indicated that they are currently not interested in developing a trail on that segment, and may be willing to assist in the financing of the passenger rail project. Of course, that statement again was pre-COVID, so we'll have to go back to them and see how things are now. So with that update, again, all our studies are on our website if you want to read those specifically. Phase three is probably the best one to get familiar with. I think is the most valuable. I think, Amanda, you wanted to say some things, and then we'll get going into discussion.
Yeah, I would mention just quickly, too, that when we did those studies, it was important to the Crandix Railroad, as well as the MPO staff, as well as the board, to actually make those ridership numbers basically FTA friendly, meaning that if we wanted to ever apply for FTA funds, that survey was conducted in such a way that they would actually accept the survey. So that's just one thing that I've always found was important. I think showed some good foresight, at least for this board, to have the ability to get that far down the road, so that if and when we ever do want to apply for funding, we don't have to start the process all back over again. So just something I wanted to note quickly.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. So I just realized something as I was sitting over there. I was realizing that we've looked at passenger rail from Chicago to Iowa City. We've looked at commuter rail from Iowa City to North Liberty, and we're doing a huge project out here at I380. So you guys are really getting a lot of attention, and I think that must say a lot for you guys. So hopefully you guys are noticing that we're excited about the things we want to do in Iowa City to improve the area and the region. So anyway, we've participated in all 3 studies, as mentioned earlier. We've financially contributed to all 3 studies. And we felt that it was important. We're a multimodal agency, and so I work specifically with rail. Tammy works with rail, aviation, and transit. We do highway and bike ped. But the thing that is so unique about this particular opportunity is that you don't have a short line or a Class 1 railroad, for that matter. This is a short line railroad coming to the table and saying, we want to offer something to the community related to passenger rail. That just doesn't happen. And so most of the time, passenger rail is something that the freight railroads try to stay away from. Obviously, this corridor has some unique aspects to it. It was originally developed for passenger rail or commuter rail, and so it's a very great opportunity in that way, because a lot of times when you're trying to introduce passenger rail, you're looking at a lot of investment because there's a lot of at-grade crossings, there is infrastructure that needs to be built, there's just not opportunities for stations to be designed and developed along the corridor and so on and so forth. And so the unique opportunity you have here is an opportunity that folks between Des Moines and Ames want, because we get calls all the time, literally. And most frequently, since these studies were done, we get a lot of calls from those folks saying, we would like to know, can you guys do a study and plan between Des Moines and Ames? Which, you know, it's a similar sort of type of thing. You know, you got university, a bigger community, you know, regional area. And so folks want to commute. There's lots of commute between those two areas. And there's a major transportation corridor right next to it, a highway corridor. And so we get those calls, we get those questions through our NEPA process with the public involvement. So those questions and comments come through all sorts of avenues. And so the unfortunate part is we have to say a lot of that corridor is abandoned over in the western part of, or the central part of the state. And so we don't have that opportunity there to introduce this sort of thing that you guys are able to introduce. So I just wanted to mention that as a preface, because that's something that's very unique to this opportunity. As I mentioned, we're a multimodal agency, so we work with Crandic a lot, and obviously we work with the MPOs and RPAs, as mentioned, all the funding that streams through the DOT. And so we hopefully we're a good partner with you guys, in that in the future, if there is an opportunity for this service to be up and running, we can continue to be a partner. We do recognize that there would have to be a locally led effort, because we do not have funding within our agency to lead this type of effort. But there is, as mentioned with the Small Starts program, the FTA Small Starts, there is quite a bit of legwork that has to occur to get that application up and going. And so Iowa DOT has committed to helping with that sort of effort and administration of those types of things. Obviously, you guys would have to work out all the details with the funding, but there might be some things that, you know, some programs we have that potentially could help as well. We just would have to consider all that as we move forward. We've never done commuter rail, but we're willing to help see what we can make happen. And so I just wanted to mention that. And was there any questions? There was one other thing. You guys had asked about the small starts. So small starts is for projects that are less than 300. So this is the FTA federal funding program. Small starts are projects that are less than 300 million in total. And let's see, and total smaller starts funding sought is less than 100 million. So that's probably where this project would fall under. And so with the infrastructure money, it's going from 300 million to 400 million, and eligibility going from 150 million up from the previous 100 million for what I mentioned just before. So that's good for the program, because when we originally started looking at this effort, we weren't sure if small starts was going to go away. But obviously it's still around, it's still available, and so that's exciting to know as well. I mentioned a little bit about Chicago to Iowa City. We finished, that's the passenger rail, or the intercity passenger rail study that we started working on actually since the Midwest Regional Rail Initiative started in 1996, but we actually applied for funding with Illinois DOT in 2009 and 10 and received a grant. We finished a corridor study, a high-level planning study at the end of last year. And right now we're just waiting to see what happens with Illinois, because really, you know, the service needs to get to Moline, and then we can see what else we can do. So that's kind of where that sits.
Would there be any benefit to starting smaller? I understand that the rail is there, but can we start with fewer cars or, you know, less population?
For the commuter rail, from North Liberty to Iowa City?
Yeah.
I guess I'm not absolutely sure. Like a less robust program?
Yeah.
I suppose there's that possibility. I think the the consultants, and correct me if I'm wrong, they kind of found like the sweet spot of what we would want to start out with to make it most effective. Because sometimes if you go too small, you don't, get that ridership and revenue that you need to kind of really balance things out. So I think that what they put together, they really evaluated that closely to make sure that it was the right start.
Yeah, I think that's accurate, Lori. And at one point in time, maybe this has been 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years ago, there was a private group that was rehabbing old like London subway cars that had contacted us. And I don't know how serious they were about it, but at one point they actually wanted to bring some cars here and basically run up and down the Cranach line, really with like just a few stops and really basic infrastructure. And I think after talking to them more about it, they even realized that you kind of have to almost go a little bit bigger just to make a good run at it, basically, because otherwise, I mean, yeah, people can get a flavor for riding a train up and down the tracks, but the times would have been so much slower because the safety equipment wouldn't have been there, that it's sort of like, it's a little disingenuous because you put them on a train that goes, I forget what the speed was at the time, but it could only go maybe 20 or 30 mile an hour, where with the safety improvements that can be made, it goes 40 or 50 mile an hour, and don't quote me on those numbers, but it was something to that effect where they just thought, it's really not worth doing this unless you sort of just jump in with both feet. I think that was what we got. Now, that was a private group that came to that conclusion. But then I think, as Amanda mentioned, I think our consultants came to the same conclusion, that it's sort of like, the ridership's going to be there. You may as well just invest in it and do it the right way from the get-go. And just there's some cost savings there too, from starting off too small and then having to sort of reinvent the wheel and add to it.
I think that the frequency of service was key to the study. In order to achieve that every 30 minutes, you needed so much equipment to do that. And I think it's designed, there's 6 cars that were proposed. So 2 operating in one direction, 2 the other, and then you have 2 spares, because if they go down, it really hurts your system. So you have to keep rotating those in and out. But that's what the study entailed. But it was the frequency they were looking at.
And
otherwise, you wouldn't get the ridership.
And it's no secret that I'm a proponent of the rail. I think it's whether it happens now or in 10 years or 20 years or 30 years, I think it will happen eventually. The one thing I do mention to people, and I may have mentioned this group before, is that the 83 interchange, which we're very thankful for the DOT's help with that and funding that, but that's a $350-400 million project, whereas this rail, we're in the more like $50 million price range. So, if one interchange is 350 or 400 million, it seems to me that adding a completely new mode to our area for maybe 50 million, that is shared between, 5, 6, 7, 8 entities, however many would participate potentially, seems actually sort of like a bargain to me. In transportation dollars, it's really a fairly small amount of dollars for something that major. So still a lot of money to be sure, but for transportation, it's really not a huge number when road reconstruction projects in all of our communities, are $6, $8, $10 million pretty regularly.
Tammy, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't have a microphone.
It's fine. You're fine. Yeah.
So I'll just add a little bit, one anecdotal, one more, but the I380 Bus Express, that's been going, we were just recently looking at the numbers for that, and even with the started just before the pandemic, and then ridership was going up to not quite, but it was on a nice trajectory to what the estimates were. Then of course it fell back, but it's back on that trajectory. And so I think, and that goes all the way from Cedar Rapids here, but I think that demonstrates couple things, the recognition of from the department of the importance of the transportation in this area, and then also just the need for those additional modes and services for the people in the area, and the willingness for people to ride it in the bus, even in these difficult circumstances. So to me, that is a sign of, this is viable. This is something viable. And then the other thing is, I guess I have 2 more things, but this route that we have here is, as Amanda alluded to, all over the place, because we used to have 10,000 miles of rail, something like that, and we're under 4,000 now,
Yeah.
maybe?
Right around 4,000.
That have been abandoned, and so there's all kinds of places that, there was rail, either freight rail, mostly freight rail, but had passenger, that aren't there anymore. And this is such a unique corridor. is that it was built for passenger rail. It wasn't built for freight. So you're not having to convert it to a freight rail and deal with a lot of issues that converting something to freight to passenger has. It was built for passenger, which makes it just, yeah, really, I'm really passionate about trying to get this to move forward. And then my anecdotal story is my uncle, who's a World War II vet, went to University of Iowa, so he always still goes, he's like 93, he still goes to University of Iowa, watch football, watch games and stuff like that. I don't think the service was in service when he was in college. It had just stopped. I can't remember the years exactly, but when I think about this corridor, I think of my Uncle Wallace, and I'm like, oh my gosh, when he was young, this was maybe still running way back when he used to ship his dirty laundry home on train to his mother in Council Bluffs to wash. Isn't that a weird world that we lived in? But I think I would just wanted to emphasize like the uniqueness of this corridor in Iowa. Like if commuter rail, passenger rail is going to start, like this is the opportunity. So just wanted to kind of say that from both a DOT perspective, but also my personal perspective there too. So.
And with commuter rail versus intercity passenger rail, because of the dynamics of it, there's a lot of economic development that grows along that corridor. And so we have talked to several other states, we've talked to other cities that have passenger rail, or commuter rail, light rail, and they said that there's just stuff that comes up. And of course, there's no way to know for sure. There's no way to really capture that because it's a potential. But everybody we ever talk to says, yep, there's economic development that occurs, and it's usually way more than anybody anticipates. And so because there'll be several stations and there'll be several stops, the folks coming into town will be able to utilize it. The people coming from this area for tourism will be able to utilize it. The locals will be able to utilize it. It could end up being a really great opportunity for folks along that corridor and developers and others, communities along that corridor. So.
Yeah, I agree. And, it's not my place to push this project. We work for you all. But I would add, too, that you're all aware of your road projects that occur in your communities. As I mentioned to you earlier, it's not unusual to have a $6 to $10 million road reconstruction project in any of our communities. The thing about those is, we work through those projects, but we don't necessarily always worry about the ridership. In this case, it would be volume, traffic volume. This, as I mentioned earlier, when we did the studies, it was set up to be able to apply for FTA funding. But I also don't want everybody to get too caught up in the ridership number either, because the actual ridership number only provides so much towards the service itself, just like our transit systems do. They don't prop themselves up. The ridership and the fares definitely help, but they're heavily subsidized. And it's the same with road projects. It would be the same with this. So I think, when we look at those road projects, we don't worry always about how much traffic will be on those roadways. It's just we know they're necessary to get folks where they need to go. So I think, too, in years past, we've been a little more hung up on ridership maybe than we should be. And I think we may need to look, as Amanda mentioned, just more at the sort of the intangibles, which is difficult, I know. But I think that's something that is worth thinking about as well.
And also, another thing that I've noticed when I've ridden light rail or commuter rail is there is advertisements inside the, equipment. A lot of times that helps pay for things. We all know advertising is extremely expensive business, and so a lot of money can be generated through those types of avenues, as well as the station stops. So depending on what the community would want that to look like, there is a lot of potential to support that with additional marketing funds and those types of things.
Laura, I'm going to put you on the spot. I know that you had a big
Sure.
interest in this. I just want to make sure your questions and comments are heard.
Oh, thank you, Terry. I appreciate that. Yeah, I've reached out to many of you individually before today, just kind of based on my interest. Thank you for the storytelling. So I'm going to just tell a really quick story. 20 plus years ago, I knew Terry because I worked for the city of North Liberty. And at the time, I was making an oral history project where I gathered videos of the oldest residents of the community and some of my favorites. One gentleman named Homer Riggle. Homer Riggle was 90 years old when I interviewed him, and he talked about riding the Crandic Rail. They call called it the vomit comet. It will be much smoother if we bring it back. But that was really impactful just to hear how transformative it was for families, business people, students at the university, just getting between the communities in such an efficient way. And when we think about our ability to move people on the corridor now, it really is so entirely dependent on 380 and on Coral Ridge Avenue, 965 Renshaw Way, that it's only going to get worse as our communities grow so rapidly. So we really need to look at an alternative mode to be able to move people. So yes, this is a little bit of my passion project, because a year ago when this phase 3 study was presented to us, I think I said to Kent, kind of like, what's missing? What do we need to do to move this forward? And he said, the political will. I said, okay, well, I think we can do something about that because we can work together. And I think what the pandemic has shown us is certainly that our communities are working together. We have collaborated. Now, I've lived here my entire life, and I think we have collaborated as a corridor, North Liberty, Coralville, Iowa City, the County of Johnson County, the University of Iowa, University Heights, Tiffin. We are now working together in ways and collaborating on projects that I haven't seen in my lifetime. So I think the time is really right. And when the University of Iowa Healthcare got their certificate of need approved for this $400 million hospital that's going to be built 0.2 miles from this track, I thought, boy, that might be good for them as well, for their workforce development. And as you mentioned, Amanda, the economic development potential, when I think of our communities and the real estate that is available, the affordable housing that's already situated along the tracks, the ability to give people the opportunity to move who may not have a car, can't rely on a car, choose not to rely on a car, and the climate impact of being able to shift, hopefully, a significant portion of our transportation north-south to rail instead of the roads. So that's kind of my pitch, and I'm hoping that we can together maybe give staff a little bit of direction on what next steps could be, or even consider forming a committee of this group to keep this moving forward, to keep meeting, to keep pushing so that we don't lose track of it.
Did you have anything
I
else?
have nothing else. I just was here to do the rah-rah, let's do this. Thank you.
I know that I had brought to your attention, we kind of discussed it before about the specific federal funding. And we thought at that time it may be dedicated to like Amtrak style.
Right.
Is that still true?
Yeah, and maybe the DOT can speak to this more than I can, but so, yeah, I don't think, my perception is that the Amtrak money won't be available for this, but I think with the federal transportation bill that was passed, or the federal infrastructure bill that was passed, I mean, I think the sky's sort of the limit on the things we could apply for. Now, I may be speaking out of turn, but there are huge grants out there. There's build grants, there's obviously the small starts money that's always there, and there's a whole slew of other programs. So I think there's a lot of different approaches we could take. I'll be honest with you, I don't know what those all are right now, but there is a ton of money out there, and I think, that's certainly something we can look into is what's available. And like I say, with that new infrastructure bill, I had something come across my desk the other day, and there's something like 60 or 80 different categories that are provided in there. So I think not unlike any other big infrastructure project, if this were to ever move forward, I would probably see a number of different funding sources helping. I know that gets a little sticky with federal funding, but it to me seems like one of those things that you can piecemeal together as well. Sorry, I was going to say the one other thing that I didn't mention too. When Krandick Railroad is basically Alliant Energy. Alliant Energy, it's a subsidiary of Alliant Energy. When we talked about this years ago, Alliant was a little bit more forthcoming in their ability to potentially help fund something too. And I won't say, they never said what they could help fund or what that structure would look like, but they were open to potentially, helping in some way. I did talk to Jeff Woods, who is the Krandick representative that's been our contact. And he said, yeah, with COVID, things are a little different now. And he said, I really can't speak to it, but I also think there's the potential for a public-private partnership as well. The devil's in the details, but I think certainly Alliant Energy and Krandick, like I think Amanda mentioned, I mean, they actually brought this to us years ago. We weren't seeking this. They said, hey, we've got this resource. What do you say? What would the communities want to do? which is unique, as Amanda mentioned. So there's that other opportunity to should we get down the road here a little bit further and want to try and do something, that would certainly be a conversation to be had too.
So the question is, how do we get it moving?
Yeah, like Laura mentioned, I mean, if we take direction from the board, if the board says, staff move forward, I'll be honest with you, I don't know what the next steps would even be exactly, but that I think is the next step, is figure out what we do from here. We've never really sort of got over that hump just yet on what that next step looks like. The studies do provide some information about what we need to do in the bigger term. But I certainly think if the board says, yeah, we're ready to start investigating this further, we will do that, whatever it looks like. Our long-range plan, which Emily we had an agenda item for, is due every 5 years. That's in addition to our normal work, obviously. That actually will be done in May. It has to be, because we have to be done with it. So in addition to our normal work, I think we do have a little bit of, we'll have a little bit extra time that we were working on the long-range plan that we can shift into something else. So we've got a little bit of time we can put to this, if that's the will of the board, and then we'll just kind of figure out what we need to do.
Would it be out of the question to come back in January when you got all the new fresh faces and stuff, and work toward, like Laura says, at least an interim working committee in conjunction with the MPO?
Yeah.
Start dragging this thing down, working on it?
I think that's certainly possible if that's what the board gives us direction to do. I mean, we could certainly grab a member from each community. I also want to respect, I've talked to Aaron about this in the past too, and there are concerns, how this affects transit and other things. It's not all without that discussion too. But yeah, I think, kind of the sky's the limit. And I think if this board says we at least want to start investigating this further, I think we can get a committee together or internally just look and see what those next steps are. So at a minimum, I think we can come back in January and say, okay, we've actually given this some thought now. Or if we get that direction in January, come back at our March meeting and say, we've given this some thought now. Here's what we think the next, 5 steps are.
Well, let's mark it up for January for discussion and try to move it down. Okay?
Yeah, I would add that I'm a huge fan of rail for all the reasons that all of you, especially Laura, listed. There are plenty of people who don't have cars. There are plenty of people, ideally we want to take vehicles off the road. And if you have a big facility going up for UIHC, it's sort of going both ways. It's an ideal way to get people both ways. And North Liberty currently has limited public transit itself. That really helps get people into Iowa City as well. It's hard for me to see a downside for it when you think of equity, when you think of the environment. And I'll add an anecdote of my own. It's like when my parents first moved here in the very early 1950s, they took the Crandic up to Cedar Rapids to look for their first car.
Yeah, I really think now is the time, especially with the infrastructure bill and the idea of the population growth. I think of it also from a safety perspective, in addition to an equity perspective. I think it behooves us to look at ways to get vehicles off of the road as often as we can, just for safety, for climate. And I think the economic development benefits are very attractive too.
But again, by having representatives from each community can, deal with what's positive about the community as far as the use of it, but they're also in a position to bring up the negatives, and maybe we better think about that in terms of this. That way you get a comprehensive look at all sides involved.
Agreed.
I agree. I look at this from an operative perspective, because usually I'm responsible for running these things, the van pools, the buses, the parking. And so we have really finite, granular data about people's behaviors coming to the university and the times and things like that. But Megan, I agree with you. The timing is right. There's a lot of excitement about the transportation bill and the funding. And I'm sort of inspired by this. I do have my reservations, but just hearing the stories and your guys' feedback is very enlightening to me. So from the university perspective, obviously we have a new president, and I can't speak for the entire university, but I do know that it's wise to at least explore this. And if there is some funding, federal or other, to assist and defray that capital investment, we would be silly not to at least chase it down and start. But I agree with you. You know, we will, the university, especially probably my department and our team, you know, definitely beat it up and make sure it works for us. It has to, because we can't, you know, obviously responsibly move into this. So we're excited. So thank you and for all the talks today. I really appreciate it.
I'd like to say something, please.
Please.
Those nice people, those Johnson County Board of Supervisors has allocated $100,000 to investigate the transportation for FY23. So let's get the ball rolling.
And Johnson County helped pay for the studies as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm here now.
Any other comments? I really appreciate your input on this one, so finally get it moved off base here and go with it.
Yeah, thanks to the DOT for coming.
Yes, that helped.
And I think what I'll do, we've got a pretty full agenda usually in January, but we will at least come up with something to share with you, some action steps maybe for the following meeting, or some questions for you all to get some direction. But we'll at least have it on the agenda and we'll have thought through it a little bit more intelligently, so
Okay.
it'd be great. Thank you.
Frank, you're up.
Jerry. Frank Waseth, Associate and Transportation Planner. Tonight I just have a brief update on the local traffic volumes. Since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, staff has been monitoring traffic in the metro area, relying on data from the DOT's automatic traffic recorders, which they have located throughout the state and including a couple in the Iowa City area. So we analyzed peak hour traffic and 72-hour traffic, the traffic counts that we normally collect for our studies for all the member agencies. And based on that data and historical data from these sites, we're able to see a massive dip, at the beginning of the pandemic and a slow recovery, kind of outlined in that graph that's included in the memo. And for the months of September 2020 through May 2021, we, as traffic was rebounding slightly towards the baseline average, we adjusted our own traffic counts for that time to be able to give a realistic view of what a full volume of traffic would be for those traffic studies. Since May of this year, traffic volumes recorded at these locations have returned to their pre-pandemic levels, and we've stopped any adjustments for our local counts. We've continued to monitor these locations as well as just the monthly average daily traffic, which is shown in the graph there. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. It looks like everything has kind of rebounded in this about 2-year time frame. So we don't expect any more massive dips, but if you guys have any questions regarding this data and in any particular location for any community, we'd be happy to share that.
Questions for Frank? Thank you.
Yeah, I think probably we all feel what Frank just mentioned. I mean, it seems like traffic's pretty much back to pre-pandemic levels, and in fact, it really is. So, and after I just got done telling you all not to worry about ridership for the rail, it is important for your communities because of our road use tax funds. So road use tax funds were way down during the pandemic, and they've pretty much rebounded for the most part, which is good news for the financial coffers.
Okay. And approaching the podium is Sarah. Go for it, kid.
Here I am annually to talk about the Susanson Charity Challenge for this holiday season. We've been doing the charity, well, we had been doing the charity challenge for 9 years in honor of Linda Susanson, someone that many of you probably recall in her honor. And each community does its own fundraising to help mostly the local food banks, in addition to the Valley View Lodge and Iowa City working with the Joan Buxton Children's Aid Fund. Last year, we did something different during the pandemic. You know that a lot of our communities, the staff who do the fundraising, a lot of us were not working from the office during the pandemic, and so the MPO took up a different effort last year and did the Trails to Table Challenge. Didn't raise as much money as we normally raise when all of the communities are involved, but so I'm just here to see what you want to do this year. We can go back to what we were doing before, but it's entirely up to the board.
Yeah, so historically, everybody has kind of done their own thing, and as Sarah mentioned, last year we just switched it over to what we called the Susanson Charity Challenge, where staff essentially rode walked, biked, ran, all the trail mileage basically in town.
Yeah.
And it was successful. We could even do that again, but we assumed maybe that the communities would want to maybe flip back to what we had done pre-pandemic. We've also given the option in the past. We know everybody's busy this time of year, and we know everybody gives to other charities and that sort of thing too. So we've also given the option to not continue doing the Linda Severson Challenge, but we can do whatever the board would like to do.
The particular issue that I'm seeing is, it seems like we have a steady report of our food banks getting hit on pretty hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, the need is still there for sure.
And I would rather go back to that right now, because there is a substantial need out there in any community that's just sitting here.
Yep, way too much food insecurity.
Yes. So you want to carry on with what we traditionally did with the involvement from the different staffs from the different communities, traditional?
Okay.
Okay.
So Sarah will reach out to the
Yeah.
clerks and kind of share the information with them. That sounds great.
Thank you.
It's a great thing, you know.
And we are at the end. Motion to adjourn.
I do have one other thing, sorry, Mr. Chair. I separated this. I'll be quick. Some of you, we were being coy earlier about the item where we were putting Frank's name on basically the FDA documents and his ability to execute those documents. But the reason is that Brad Newman is retiring. So after 31 years at the MPO, Brad's retiring at the end of December. Congratulations. Thank you. Brad's going to be hard to replace. On a personal note, I've worked with Brad for 15 years, and I couldn't imagine a better person to work with. And as many of you know from working with Brad, he's the consummate professional, so he'll be missed. And I did some quick addition. So we meet fairly infrequently. We meet about 7 times a year for the board. And if you add that up, 7 times a year times the 31 years Brad's been here, he basically could have done one of these every day for a working year, which is pretty incredible.
Your final shot at everybody.
It's been long 31 years. I've seen a lot of changes in 31 years, which, proud to be part of a lot of those changes, working with this group. But
When's your final day?
end of December, 30th of December.
Okay.
End of the year.
I asked if he wanted to be a consultant, and he said no. So we're going to have to do it without him.
Yeah.
Okay. With that, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All not wanting to go home, say no.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you.